Welcome to the Shattering Inequities podcast, where we uncover the bold, research-driven strategies that are transforming education for every student, especially those historically left behind. In each episode, we'll highlight leaders who are not just imagining a better future, but actively creating one. Through real-world successes, challenges, and actionable insights, this podcast is a space to crowdsource solutions that advance shattering inequities in education. And now, here's your host, Dr. Robin Abelar-LaSalle.
Welcome, everybody, to the Shattering Inequities podcast, where we believe every student is entitled to a premium education, no matter where they go to school, where they live, or what their circumstance. As we're here for two purposes. One is to inform and inspire. And in order to do that, we bring on guests who have demonstrated results that defy that dastardly inevitability assumption that only some students can do academically and others cannot by group. And the second goal is to do research. We're crowdsourcing, if you will, from people who are doing this work and being successful at it. And after a set of these interviews, we will collect the data, analyze it, and then produce research to contribute to the field in the form of white papers and other ways of communicating the solution to the issue of that gap in outcomes between historically higher and lower performing groups. And with that, let me introduce you to our guests for today. I am so pleased to welcome two people who I admire so much. One, Dr. Sarah Mott Gonzales. Sarah, welcome to our podcast. And Sarah comes with a lifetime of experience from teacher all the way up, having done all the jobs, and led turnaround initiatives multiple times over where students outperformed their predicted achievement. I will also introduce to you one of my favorite humans on the planet. This is Anabelia. And Anabelia is a first-generation college graduate. Snaps to Anabelia. And her story exemplifies in the first person what we're talking about when we talk about defying the odds. Welcome, Anabelia, to our show.
Thank you.
So first, what I'd like to do is ask, and I will call you Sarita, excuse me, because
That'd be great.
how I know you, Sarita. Can you please share with us what in your life, just so we get a tidbit of what makes Sarita tick, what in your life led you to the place you are today, where you're a champion for all students? And in there, can you please share the not on my watch moment that you can recall that really fuels that fire in your belly to do this work every day?
Sure. The inspiration behind everything that I do is my family, my parents and my grandparents, and even great grandparents who really sacrificed everything so that those of us who came after them could receive a college education if we wanted to do that. That was something we talked about from, I feel like, the day I was born. So I'm the granddaughter of migrant farm workers and sweatshop workers, and I'm very proud to now be a second generation college graduate, and so thankful to them for all the sacrifices that they made. And as a young person, I became a teacher in a Title I district here locally in Southern California.
Please
And
define. We're famous for shorthand names, so please define Title I for our audience.
Oh, sure. So for students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, so it was a fully Title I district, which means all the kids in the district, with maybe a handful that would be the exception, but 99.9% of the kids were under-resourced in terms of family finance. And so, of course, that brings with it a host of challenges and then other factors as well. Anyway, that was the district that I served, and I was there very happily in the classroom for 10 years. And then I moved into administration. And I happened to move into administration at a time when our school was undergoing some major changes and challenges. So the boundaries had shifted in our district. So we had a bunch of new students and we had change in principal. And there was just a huge number of factors that caused some confusion on campus. Being the nosy administrator that I was, I had a student come into my class and ask for a schedule change. And so, of course, I pulled up this child's schedule and looked at his transcript. And I realized that this child was rightfully asking to be moved out of his Algebra I class. When I looked at his transcript, this child was a junior and he had taken Algebra I twice, as a freshman and as a sophomore, and had passed it both times. He had been scheduled for the same class 3 times in a row. And when I was going through our data system, I found all kinds of errors there that basically demonstrated we had no system for double checking that kids were getting the courses they needed for graduation and for college readiness. So I essentially went and knocked on my principal's door and asked him if I could be in charge of the counseling department. And I volunteered and we went from there. But it was quite a mess, but we made a big success. So that work right out on my watch moments. There's no way it's happening to this kid.
It is hard to imagine how it would be that a student would get assigned the same class 3 times and effectively take them off the path of being eligible to attend university upon graduation, much less being prepared for all other life options that require as much rich education as possible. And yet, it is not the case that all students are met with the same expectations for what their K-12 education should be like, and the assumption that all students are going to graduate with a premium education. Velia, you lived this firsthand. I already introduced you as a college graduate. I'm graduate with honors in your bachelor's degree, by the way, just saying. So you're no slouch academically. And yet, you had an interesting experience, didn't you, going through school that was, you defied the odds to get where you got, didn't you? Tell us a little bit about that.
So, as I think it was previously mentioned, I'm first generation college graduate. So, again, I think key word is first generation. I really didn't know what after high school was going to be like. So, once the time got there, I was like a junior going into senior year. And that's when I was like, okay, what am I going to do? What is the first step? What do? You go to your counselors because you've always been told, like, you can go to your counselors if you have any questions, any concerns, you go to them. I did. I went to her. I never really talked to her my whole 4 years I was there. Maybe once a year only. And that was only because you had to sign up for classes. Luckily, no double booking of the same class happened to me, but she looked at my transcript. She didn't know me. I don't know her. And she just, oh, are you sure you want to go to college? She didn't straight up say college isn't for you. She just said, you should think about it. I see that you have no AP courses. AP courses are get you ready for college, basically, is what she insinuated to me. And so I'm panicking. I said, it's too late. I'm like in junior now. I told her I wanted to go to a 4 year, and she told me, like, maybe consider community college, just because, again, she assumes that I don't have any AP courses. I have no kind of experience in her eyes. I was very quiet to myself, but I'm very applied. I work hard. But again, she doesn't know me. I don't know her. I take this information very not lightly at all. It like hurt me. Like talking about it, like I don't realize how hurtful or traumatic it is until like later on. Because I just saw like a quote the other day and it just, wow, had I listened to them, I don't know where I'd be now. And that's true. If I left the office and I didn't pursue any type of college education, I don't know where I would be or who I would be. But that didn't happen to me. I got help. Went to college. I went to Cal State more than 4 years because COVID hit. So maybe 5, just because the rough transitions, that was new. But I graduated with my bachelor's in child development with honors. So
Yes, you did. And the help you got, was it in school?
no. So it was heartbreaking that day. I called my mom because my mom was working. My mom works 2 jobs. And I told her, I was like, Mom, I can't go to college. And that scared her because that's all she's ever wanted for me is you go to school, you get a good education, and you get a good job. And she was like, no, I know somebody who can like help you through the process. And she took me to her and she mentored me and she helped me along through all the steps. And thanks to her, like her support, I was able to complete my higher education goals.
Anabelia, how is it that your mom had this contact? How is it that she was in this network?
Okay, my mom is a housekeeper, and I've never been ashamed to say that. She met her through housekeeping. Yeah.
We have so much in common on Velia. That was my first job in high school, was cleaning houses. And my mom was a housekeeper too as I was growing up, and ended up becoming a teacher. But we have so much in common there. Yeah.
Sarita, explain this. How could this have been the experience of Anabelia? Of course, in high school, you don't have a crystal ball, but we do, because we know that she went directly to a 4-year, aced everything, was on the dean's list every quarter, by the way. I happen to know this every quarter, and then graduated with honors. How is it that this happens? And in your experience, can you give us an example of some results of a system where this was corrected?
Sure. So, in my experience, especially after having run a counseling department for several years, it is an observation that I have that in many high school environments, unless a child has a relationship with a specific person who mentors them through the process, they don't receive the information that they need in many schools and places. Some places do a wonderful job, but there are still some places that really struggle to provide kids with the information that they need in order to have every life choice available to them after high school. So my own experience was that a family member mentored me. My counselor did not provide me with that information either. And when you think about it, is pretty crazy because Anabelia and I both fit the profile of a child who absolutely has college as an option, regardless of whether or not you took AP classes. Her GPA, all the things she was involved in, she was absolutely a candidate for a 4-year university. And the other piece is that sometimes schools expect kids to come to them. So I'm going to have the meeting for kids who are interested in going to college. And if you want to, you'll come. Anabelia came to the office and is asking for the information. And she has this person who I'm sure is a good person in many ways, but for whatever reason, had this idea that Anabelia was not a candidate for a 4-year and made that clear whether or not she specifically said that to her. She absolutely intimated that to her. So in the absence of a system school-wide, we end up depending on adult beliefs and adult assessment of student potential. I might see a kid and think, wow, that kid's college material based on whatever is in my head as to what a college-bound kid looks like. And so I seek that kid out. I mentor them. I provide them with all the information. I make sure they know about all the sessions we're having. If you don't have a system, what we've seen time and time again is that kids like Anabelia fly under the radar. She's very behaved. She's very polite. She's quiet. Even though she's got all the right characteristics and qualifications, and also sometimes based on people's beliefs and expectations of different student groups, and particularly Latinas, let's just call it out, they will not end up getting what they need in terms of the information and the help that they need to move through that process as a first-generation college student. So important.
I once did a study of a K-12 system that had the one group not achieving on any metric as well as the other groups. And in this case, it was Asian and white students that were superior academically in every metric, and Latino students were at the bottom of that gap. And when it came down to it, course placement was really the barrier, and that's an adult-driven activity. And when I looked at students side by side, students with the exact same paperwork, with the right class, the right grades, the right test scores, would not get moved on to honors or AP automatically like others would, or would just be told, oh, you have the option of taking a 4th year of math or science, but you really don't have to, or discouraged from a competitive, more rigorous program because they can go to a community college anyway. That'll be just fine for them. And when I looked at the students side by side, the higher performing groups were being up leveled and the lower achieving students were being downgraded. And that's kid by kid with the same exact paperwork. How is that possible? I don't believe that we have billions of flawed humans in our education system who intentionally want to hurt groups of kids. But Abelia, how is it possible in your lived experience that you got that response? With your transcript, if you got into Cal State LA, your transcript looked just like everybody else's. Grades, courses, and yet other students just automatically were assumed to be going on and they were being counseled and supported in that way. What does your lived experience tell you about why that is?
I really think it has to do with my cultural background and the fact that I am a female. I wish, or maybe I don't wish to know that more Hispanic kids or Hispanic girls in particular were turned away. Like, hey, you don't have to go to college. I know it's an idea, but I feel like we are pushed. Sometimes I wish counselors, if there's a way, because I have no idea, I've never been in any kind of an administration position where can you identify a good student without their name, without knowing their background, with anything, just letting the grades speak for themselves or the scores or whatever. That I feel would make a huge difference because, again, my transcript, I didn't mention this, but they're A's and B's. C's hurt when I got them, but I had a high GPA. I think I have I'd say a 3.5. I don't remember. High school was a while ago, but no, and I did have AP. But what was the AP that I had? I had AP Spanish. So maybe to her, that was like second nature to me in her eyes. So she like discredited that. So from the start.
That's just funny because that's saying anybody who takes AP English who's an English speaker, that should be second nature. And that's absolutely not the case, is it?
Yeah, we can't say exactly she profiled me, she this, she that. Again, I didn't know her, she didn't know me. But from my experience, looking back at it now, I was definitely like underlooked because of being Chicana. Yeah, just being a Chicana, you know.
Sarita, it looks like you have something to share about Anabelia's observations. Share a little scholarship on this. We're just
Sure. So I think there's a few things there. Obviously, what we see in Anabelia's experience is that the school didn't have any kind of system in place. There was a system, I guess they would say the system was that once a year, the kids would have a one-on-one with their counselor, and that was sufficient. But it was not sufficient because that counselor, and I'm assuming it was the same woman the whole 4 years, Anabelia, that's what it sounds like, did not lay out the next steps and choices for Anabelia and the she didn't say, Anabelia, you have A's and B's. You're able to enter this AP class as a junior. Are you interested in doing that? Oh, what's AP? Let me share with you about what AP is and how it can benefit you so that you and your mom can make the decision that's best for you. That wasn't happening. There wasn't a standard that what we would say, we're not going to go below this. There's not a policy saying all kids will receive this information. All kids will be presented with these different roads toward their eventual goal after high school. So that makes it very difficult when there's no set standard for what a child will receive. So there are systems now that are being created and implemented, and I can describe one in particular that I've worked in, but that is really important to make sure that there is an absolute ironclad expectation that all students will receive particular pieces of information, will be provided with particular opportunities so that any child who exits a K-12 district has any life option open to them. 4-year, 2-year work experience, joining the service, going into a trade, anything that child wants to do. They are not only qualified, but they're prepared for those. So I'd love to share with you about a particular project that was part of a team that worked with a district in San Diego. And like many districts, all of us really in public education, we were very much derailed many of the things that we were working to try to achieve by COVID. But I will say this district kept the vision, they kept working hard, and they have made drastic gains. So here in California, we call a college preparatory course of study the A to G requirements. That's what is required to get into a Cal State or a UC. And they're very similar to pretty much what all the private schools would be as well. When you take a look at their data, They went from, in 2018, I believe, their non-socioeconomically disadvantaged kids, so the kids that have financial resources at home, were achieving college readiness for those A to G requirements at the same rate as the state's socioeconomically disadvantaged kids. So their resource kids were achieving at the same level as the state of California's overall socioeconomically disadvantaged kids.
So they're, in essence, wealthier students were achieving at the level of students who were in poverty.
Yes. And then the kids that were in poverty were well below where the rest of the state was in terms of that average. So just to give you some numbers, the non-socioeconomically disadvantaged kids, the wealthier kids, were performing at 41% in 2018. That's the college readiness rate. And the state was at 42% for socioeconomically disadvantaged kids.
Oh,
The disadvantaged kids in the district were at 34%, so well below the state average. They put in place this comprehensive system, we call it guidance alignment, and that district has moved through implementing that system from that 41% for their non-socioeconomically disadvantaged kids, so they're kids with more wealth at home, from 41 to 65, which is well above the state's average of 58% in 2024. And their kiddos who are socioeconomically disadvantaged have gone from 34% to 52%, which is well above the state's socioeconomically
wow.
disadvantaged rate. And they're closing on the state's non-SES rate. So that's incredible. And what that shows is more kids who without a system or without a very kind of basic system like Anabelia experienced, without a set standard for all of the information and the guidance that kids would receive, when kids are provided with that information and guidance, they rise. And so they complete those college readiness requirements. And then it's really up to them to decide to make their own destiny. That's what we want for all of our kiddos when they leave high school, that they have control of their own destiny and they can move along any life path that appeals to them.
Yeah, I'm sure you had a peer group, and you're not the most gregarious personality. You're not one that puts yourself out there and sells yourself and is that quiet strength personality, quiet brilliance, I would say. You have a peer group. When you were in high school, you had friends. I'm curious to know what their experience was. Were any of them counseled into that real rigorous, high-powered academic track? Were they interacted with along the same lines as you? And what did they end up doing after high school?
So my peer group was mixed. We had some Filipino friends, some Hispanic friends. So I just want to throw that out there. We were all just from the same cultural background, but a lot of them, almost I think all of them, went into community college just because that route seemed easier than taking the extra steps to go into a 4-year. I think college counselors really tell you like, hey, this is this road and this is the other road. And then once you see, okay, what's easier? What can I do? Because you're nervous. When you're at that age, all I can remember is the nerves of whatever I decide now, like it's really gonna change the course of where maybe my life will go. That was the state of mind I had. Now I'm grown. I realize it's okay to change your mind. You can pursue more when you're ready for more. But again, thinking back to 17-year-old me, 18-year-old me, you think I'm going to go the easier route because it's hard, it's scary. I don't know what comes with it. So I really think they chose community college because of that, and money, because counselors always talk about consider the amount of money that goes into a community person's 4-year, or start of the community and then transfer to a 4-year. So,
Do you happen to know if you've kept in touch with them, for those of your friends that went to a community college, if anybody ended up transferring and graduating from a 4-year?
I do in fact know that like most of them did not transfer. No.
Okay, so Sarita,
Yeah.
shed light on this phenomenon. This is not surprising to hear, is it?
No, and unfortunately, so the most recent numbers that we have from CalPass Plus, which is the data repository for California community colleges, is that statewide, only about 10% of students who enter the transfer pathway at a community college will end up transferring to a 4-year. 10% of students who enter a community college with the intent of transferring to a 4-year will actually end up successfully transferring. And that doesn't even tell us how many of them will graduate once they get there. And that's actually with no time limit placed on it. So a kid could have been at community college 10 years and then transferred and they count it. So we're counting all the kids that entered that transfer pathway, no matter how long they took. And so many, 90% still don't transfer. And a lot of people will think when you share that information with them that, oh, that must include the kids who went there for trades. That must include the adult ed, like all the people who are served by a community college. No, that's specifically the pathway of kids who went in and said, I am interested in being here for a few years, completing my general education and moving on to a bachelor's degree.
Wow. And how does that make you feel hearing that? 10% of kids who go to community college actually end up transferring, never mind graduating.
Yes.
I feel if I had gone to community college, I don't know if I would have been part of the 10%, just because navigating the system within the school is hard.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that the is so low, just because it's hard to, once you get in, like, to follow up and push through.
Sarita,
I'm thinking about a particular piece of research, Robin. It came out in 2015 by Irvin and Bell, and they talked about mathematics as a gatekeeper. So when we think specifically about math instruction in high school, oftentimes kids who are directed into the community college pathway or state that they're interested in community college are not scheduled for more rigorous math courses, which multiple studies have shown time and again, the more rigorous your coursework is in high school, whether you go to community college or a 4-year college, you are more likely to graduate the more rigorous, especially in math, the more rigorous math coursework that you take. So I think that there's sometimes a prevailing sense at some schools that, oh, you're just going to community college, which is so offensive to those of us, first of all, whose families have been empowered to live our dreams through the community college system. But to that, I always say community college is college, right? You're going to tell me that a child can take very basic courses, not be pushed their senior year, maybe not even take math senior year, and somehow magically be prepared 15 months later to enter a community college and be successful. It's just silly. We would never advise a student who's going to attend a 4-year to get math. But somehow we feel like that's okay if a kid is just going to community college. And I don't know that most counseling teams are aware of the gauntlet that community college can be someday. When I share this, I want to give a caveat. My own family, as I've said, put my own nephew in community college. So no hate to community colleges here. Only love and support and appreciation. But that is the current status. And so you have to really know how to wade yourself through that system. And our kids who are not as rigorously prepared, it's just easier to give up and say, I guess this wasn't for me.
I think really, as we're talking about closing the gap, getting to that overlap, that intersection, so that there's no gap between historically higher and lower performing students without lowering the feeling, that what I'm noticing in your conversation is it's not about whether you end up going to a 4-year or 2-year. What it's about is what that perception of a student is, how that determines decisions that we're making for students in the K-12 system. So it's okay to go to the community college. 10 out of 100 will transfer. I happen to know the research on that shows that the 10 that transfer happen to be those who had the strongest academic, most rigorous preparation in the K-12 system. We're not talking about going to one place or the other as much as we're talking about deciding what level of education students should experience in the K-12 and whether that should be grading on the curve, where we decide a different floor for different types of students, or whether we go with Anabelia's design, which is, how about there be a default? And the default is everybody's university eligible. And then after that, they can make whatever choice they want. And how about if we make it so that perceptions about people don't influence decisions in the counseling and the direction that we provide? Anabelia, how much outside of your school counselor and maybe some teachers, how much of your daily life growing up did you have people around talking about options after high school and colleges and programs and resources and scholarships? How much of your world was consumed with that?
None. Outside of school, none. Because again, I'm first generation.
Naturally.
Yeah. I think maybe like the idea of college was always brought up to me by my mom. Well, other than that's it, like nobody else talks about that.
Which that's fascinating to me too, because people think, I'm first generation college as well. People think that sometimes, and they'll say that our families don't value education or that we don't understand college or we don't want our kids to go to college. That's just not true. Your mom, she may not have attended much formal education, certainly not here. She may not know what a college looks like. By the way, had you ever visited a college campus?
Nope.
No. Even that, visited, put feet on the ground. But she knew college. She knew college was a gateway to a better life,
Yes, she knew that.
whatever that meant. And that's always what we find when we survey parents and then we survey the adults in the system. Parents and students are aligned about what they think they're headed toward.
I think my mom would have been happy and definitely okay. Sarita said no hate to people that go to community college, but I don't think she knows. There's a 4-year, really, they don't really know. So for me, I don't know what it was, but I just knew I really want to get in a 4-year because I know I can do it and my grades show it. I don't want to listen to what the counselor said and think about community college because my grades are saying, like, I'm good enough, so why can't I?
And let me try. Wow.
I was just going to say, Anabelia, I'm so glad not only that you didn't listen to that counselor's perception of your abilities, but I'm also so thankful that you had a mama who just said, oh no, I know my kid. There's no way that this is going to be okay. And she didn't listen either. And I think that both of those are key because at that moment, you needed her to step in. So just a little tribute to your mama and to all the parents who always continue to encourage their kids, even in the face of some of these experiences where other adults do not express belief in their potential.
Yeah, I think parents should always advocate for their children. I know my mom advocated for me. Again, not knowing like what college is, there's the difference between community, 4-year, any of that. She just knew, I know my daughter. I know she can do this. And I feel like my mom always wants me to reach for the moon and the stars. And she's always lifting me up, trying to push me to reach them. So I really feel like, I don't know if parents can see this podcast or anything like that, but like advocate for your child, advocate for them because sometimes they're too quiet, too shy to see their own greatness, but they're great.
Yes.
In your experience and your scholarship, your academic preparation, and your life's pursuit in educating all students, is Anabelia onto something? Is there a way to set up a system whereby the default is every child gets a premium education?
There is. So there are ways to set up automatic benchmarks, automatic things that kick in at certain stages of a child's high school career, and specific supports that also kick in when a child is not necessarily demonstrating the achievement that we would wish for them, but they just need support. And so there are methods and ways of doing this. The one thing that I'd really like to share here today is that I think that the prevailing direction we've taken is not sufficient. So MTSS is a system that many schools and districts have adopted. And what it does is that we tier
Let's
kids.
define that. Multi-tier systems of support.
Okay, multi-tier systems.
It's levels of support.
And it's the right idea, but it tends to tier kids in isolation. So in my experience in studying many schools, what it looks like is first we'll get the grades information. We'll tier the kids by grades, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and we'll have a grades committee. And then we do the next thing is attendance. And we're going to do that in its own committee. And we're operating in silos and not being efficient and not tailoring what we're doing for kids more specifically to their needs. Most departments, and I think a lot of this has to do with the difficulty in getting the data that we want. We have tons of data, but it's hard to get it in the report the way that we would wish to see it in an SIS system, a student information system. And so they are not necessarily looking at data sets in tandem. So what I would like to see more schools do is move away from these isolated committees and work on just one aspect of a child's performance at a school, but that they would see those things work in tandem. One of the best examples I can give of this is a school that was doing MTSS, and they had a specific attendance committee that was doing tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then they had the grades committee. Well, the grades committee had placed a child in tier 2, and they had assigned them to tutoring to support them academically. But the child had poor attendance. So the child was not there to take advantage of that support. If you don't overlay and use combination data to better determine what a child needs, you're going to, without meaning to, fall into some of those errors in which we're spinning wheels and we're trying to apply certain supports to kids, and it's not the right fit for that child. So what I would want more schools to do is this guidance alignment, almost MTSS on steroids process, where we look at multiple sets of data. And the data that we choose to look at is all highly predictive of whether or not a child will successfully graduate from high school and be prepared for a 4-year or any other life option that child would like to pursue. The difference there is that leveraging of combination data to the nth degree. And that way you're moving away from work done in isolation, and you're able to see and apply supports to kids that have a shared profile, which sounds bad sometimes because it sounds like we're profiling kids. That's not what we mean.
For good, not for bad.
Yeah, good, not for ill, but have similar characteristics. So let's say we see all the kids that have poor grades, and then we take a look and we see, okay, but which kids also have poor attendance? So that creates two different groups. There are the kids who are attending. Okay, we can apply one support there. Kids who aren't attending, they're going to need a different design, a different support, or maybe a tweaked version of the other support.
Sarita, how could we systematize a way that Anabelia would be profiled for good, not evil? So because she didn't have bad attendance, she didn't have bad grades, she had the yeses and everything. Yes, she had good grades. Yes, she took the right classes. Yes, she was a good attender. Nope, she never got in trouble. Yes, she had even an AP class and scored well on that test. Yes, yes. I know there are a lot of early warning systems that catch kids that are, yeah. How do we build a system to lift up an Anabelia out of the crowd and notice her beyond people's ability to perceive her greatness?
So two things, I think: raise the expectation, the level of expectation. So many folks listening may know that the early warning systems were set up essentially as high school graduation as the end goal. What we want, especially here in the state of California, where we need more and more college graduates, we want a system that is predicated on the idea that a child will graduate from high school with all their options open to them, including up to a 4-year school. So that's number one, is you have to establish what is the end goal. After that, you need to take a look at the research and determine what the indicators at each grade level that a child is on their way to being successful. So Anabelia would have met those indicators. She would have been identified as a kid with a GPA that is college ready. She would have been identified as a kid who comes to school, who participates in school, wants to do all the right things. And so you identify those kids, and again, you lift them up, and automatically you put that kid in a group. So just like I shared the group that would be needing supports, this is a different kind of support, but this would be, okay, Anabelia, I'm going to take you out of class. Everybody in here, your GPA qualifies you to apply to a Cal State. We're going to have an information session. We're going to talk to your parents. These are the dates and times. I'm going to sign you up right now to come in for a time when you can complete your application, and also some time to just talk with counselors about the different campuses that are in the system, maybe even private schools. What do you really want to do? And have those conversations.
College visitations.
That's right.
Could you imagine if that had happened, Anabelia? If it didn't require you to just happen to saunter into your counselor's office, but if some mechanism would have popped your name up into in the face of a counselor to say she's part of this group that is on the path toward four-year university without ever seeing you. Just your indicators would direct her to
You're on the list to go on a college field trip.
what would that have been like?
Totally different because reflecting back on this whole experience, me going to her kind of telling me like, think about it, turning me down. You don't realize the impact that has on you because it still impacts me today. I like doubt myself a lot. And I feel like it has to go back to all that like in high school. Like again, I was overlooked again for being a good student, for being well behaved. And these are all things that were expected and taught of me from my mom. I know a lot of Hispanic families, like you go to school, you do your best, and you stay out of trouble, and you come home and you repeat the process. My kids get lost, and we do that, and we're quiet. And sometimes we need that little push, and no one gave me that push.
Wow. Is that the system you were describing in San Diego County? Is that how you ended up getting the amazing increase in numbers of students that graduated university eligible? Is that what you did?
Yes, because it's no longer dependent on situational factors. Which counselor did I get? Do they see me as college material? Did I have a hiccup earlier in my high school career and I wasn't doing well for a while, but now I am? So that ensures that any kid who's on that trajectory should receive certain opportunities. And that would be college planning, career planning. It really shouldn't matter what your profile is academically. Every child should be supported toward having a plan once they leave high school. Certainly a child like Anabelia, who already has all the right things going, that's one level of support and showing her all the opportunities. I would argue even for kids who are performing a little under what we would expect to see in terms of GPA or test scores, but we should inspire them and bring them into that conversation too, so they can see what is possible should their grades improve. And then everybody's got needs that need to be met by the system. And we can't default to a place again where it depends on an individual person to see in each child on their caseload a college bound kid and give every support that's necessary for that child to be ready to go off.
Real quick, Sarita, how many students does a counselor have on their caseload?
It can be from the low 1 to 200s all the way upwards, sometimes 500, 600, and it can go nutty. So certainly that is a factor. And at larger public high schools, that is very much a reality we have to contend with. So part of it is that's a really good thing to bring up because we don't want to make it sound like counselors just are not busy doing the work that they're asked to do. They certainly are amongst the most hardworking, angelic people on the planet, and almost all high school counselors. But they do have a tremendous number of kids on their caseload. So putting in place a system like that, where you're pulling groups of kids, can also help you to reach more children in the high school system as opposed to the few that come to your office. So that's a very old school setup. And I think most schools are moving towards more systems work, but there are certain better ways to do it that are more impactful and effective. And certainly using some of that combination data and those data sets is very important for identifying kids for some automatic supports like the ones we were just describing.
Let me just ask you real quickly, how often did you say you saw your counselor in your high school years?
Just once a year, and that was only to approve my schedule for the next year, and that was it.
Sarita, in the system you're describing, how frequently does this process, the system you're talking about, occur?
Sure. There's always going to be a place for one-on-one student visits. And I don't think it's right to necessarily put a number on it. It certainly should be more than once a year. There are many ways for a counselor to see that child. There are ways to broadcast messages school-wide. So Anabelia would not have had to come to the office if there had been broadcasted school-wide in every class, every course, regardless of whether it was AP or general or college prep or all the different labels we get. Hey, everybody, if you're interested in going to college, this is how you do it. This is where you come for the information session to apply, all those things. That's the sort of tier one information and the power and the systems that are utilized to send that information out. So every kid gets to hear it. You can do some small group or larger group presentations, whether that's in classrooms, assemblies, online. There's so many ways to do that with smaller groups of kids so that they can have questions.
So how frequently would you have counselor teams come together to review those multiple indicators?
5 times a year would be the appropriate number right at the beginning of school, because we will often catch things right off the bat. So no more than 3 to 4 weeks into the school year, because you want to see right away, are there kids who are in need of immediate support because of the patterns that they're already demonstrating, whether that's attendance or grades or some other factors. But certainly after each grading period. So in a traditional school, the reason I say 5 is most schools are still on a traditional calendar, which would be, so after every quarter and semester, would get together around this shared set of data, and you would come up with some plans and work together to develop groups of kids that share particular profiles, whether that's because they're meeting all of the expectations and indicators, or they're falling short and they need support. But regardless, they're going to get something. They're going to get multiple layers and levels of information and support toward their high school goals. And I think that's the most crucial thing to do, because tier 3, if you have to think about your one-on-one, that's sacred time between the counselor and their kid. That always needs to happen. We're not saying you don't have your one-on-ones. You don't have kids walk in and share with you what's going on in their life and all that sacred space that's there for a counselor. This doesn't take away from that. If anything, it allows for more of that, because you're getting more and more kids the information they need in a timely manner. So you're not having to go necessarily kid to kid, but instead you're doing some broad strokes. And then after that, you're giving maybe some more tailored strokes, depending on what that needs are or the profile of that kid needs. But then you're also getting to have more time than one-on-one with that kid, with your kid.
It sounds like this is different from an early warning system, which is like, oh, they're careful, they're not going to graduate.
No.
We expect them all to be on track. This is what it looks like to be on track 5 times a year as a 9th grader, 5 times a year as a 10th grader, 5 times a year as a junior. And then immediately, if on time 3, they fall down on something, right then and there you catch it. Is that what you're
I like to think of it, I almost envision it as like a GPS system. So we know the destination, whether it's home, but the destination is graduation from high school with all of life options and opportunities available to me from a 4-year and beyond. So if that's the destination, then when you start your GPS, you can see the amount of time it'll take to get to your destination, and kind of when you turn left here and you turn right here. And so that's what this is. And it catches us when we say, oh, they've slowed down on the route. They're not progressing maybe in the way that they should be. We need to get
traffic.
That's right. Oh, they took the wrong turn. They turned left when they should have. Rerouting. So that's what I like to think of this system as, rather than early warning system, which is more like a dashboard where they flash lights at you and tell you something's off. But we all know, many of us drive with those dash lights on for quite a long time. Don't see the mechanic. That's not always as helpful. So that's why I like to think of it more in that way, in that every kid has an individual journey. But there are certain things we know from the research are predictive of whether or not a child will move apace toward that eventual goal. And so we need to be checking multiple times a year to see who's moving in that direction and what do they need. And then also who maybe is not there. What do they need?
We don't change the goal for them. We just support them. This is screaming in my head. If you either get the information, this social capital that people call, about what classes and, who you need to connect with and which counselor has the applications and the fee waivers and the this and that. You either get that from your counselor or your teachers. That didn't work for you. Or from home somewhere, if you're second gen, and so someone already went through that wouldn't happen. Or your peer group. So I happen to know that there's research that says that one of the highest predictors of graduating with every life option available to you, you're university eligible so you can do anything you want to afterward, is being affiliated to school. Being in
Positively affiliated, Robert.
That's correct. Being positive affiliated to school. I myself am most proud of having been in drill team. As anybody who's ever met me knows, having been captain twice is my claim to fame of the Belmont High School Swinging Sweethearts. But what that did is it puts you in a peer group that does have that information. so that if the counselor doesn't tell it to you and you don't have anyone at home who knows it, a teacher doesn't mention something to you, the kids who are highly involved in school in those high status affiliations, they have that information and they trade it freely among each other. Were you in a club? Were you in drill team? Mia?
No, I was not in drill team. I was in leadership. So ironically, I was in lead crew, which is a kind of leadership class where the older, what do you call it?
Students.
Like,
Yeah, older students like mentored the new students just to like what high school is, get the groove of things, that kind of thing. I was in that.
I wonder if that made the difference for you. I wonder if that's what gave you that. Wait a minute, there are people not in my close friend group, but there are people around me because I know Link Crew and those leadership activities draw students who know I need to put stuff on my high school resume to be competitive in college. Sadly, it's not always an altruistic volunteerism disposition that comes. Yours was, but you hear kids talk about these things. I wonder if you were exposed to information that maybe some of your friends who were not part of that didn't have. Sarita, do you in your system account for
Absolutely.
affiliation? Is that an important?
Sure. One thing I will say is that we do measure it in elementary all the way through the first 2 years of high school. That's what the literature tells us is the span of time when it's highly predictive that a child who's positively involved in a school activity will go on to graduate with all their options open to them. And we don't measure it necessarily in 11th and 12th grade, not because we want people to leave their clubs and drill team and all of that when they get to 11th and 12th grade, but it's not necessarily predictive at that grade level anymore. That's important is that you're looking at particular aspects of a child's schooling experience at different times of their K-12 experience. So factors like, are they reading on the third grade level in the third grade? Are they achieving at the fifth grade level for math when they are a fifth grader? And you on the trajectory, and there are certain things that at every grade level really can predict whether or not a kid is going to graduate with all of their options open. So we know what to measure. It's just most systems make it very difficult to measure it all at the same time. Really do need to put in place a system that allows you to look at all of those different pieces of a child's schooling experience and then offer interventions and supports and also just anything that child needs in order to become successful and be ready when they graduate, know what they want.
I can't let this go, Mija Anabelia. What grade level were you in when you were in Link Crew?
Junior.
Were you involved in school? Did you have an identity in school, connection to school emotionally in 9th or 10th grade?
I don't think so.
Okay. I think what you're describing, Sarita, is Anabelia would have popped up in the system that you're describing as yes for attendance, yes for grades, yes for behavior, yes for course placement, no for affiliation.
That's right. When we found her and said,
you need to be in drill team. And with that, Sarita, you were drill team as well?
I was as well. There's a tie here.
Maybe that's going to be the finding of the research people.
Yeah.
Just the importance of drill team to a scholarship, eventual scholarship. Let me ask each of you to just think about what we've discussed today. Our task is this gap. There is a gap. We say there's an opportunity gap and an access gap. That's true. The net effect is that there's an outcome gap between the same historical groups that do better and the same historical demographic groups that do not. And that's status quo. And what we're taking on is that inevitability assumption. Must we accept it? And so that you described this district where you defied that. And that's what this show brings on, just example after example, where people are defying that inevitability assumption. But it's not by accident, it must be by design. So given that, Sarita, give us a piece of wisdom for all those champions for kids in whatever position, in whatever space in this cosmos, advocate for kids. What would be your summation, your advice, your wisdom?
I think that well-meaning adults can, without realizing it, fall asleep at the wheel at any level of a K-12. Whether it's the counselors who scheduled that child 3 times for the same course,
Right.
all the way up to maybe a superintendent who doesn't necessarily know the DF rate at their flagship high school or at their high schools. You don't know. So some of those data points, you can make decisions that take us off that GPS laid out map because we don't necessarily know our data at every level. We depend on the people below us and above us to be monitoring those things. And so make sure that you know what those research-based indicators of eventual graduation with all life options open are, and make sure that you are monitoring them closely in a nested way. So it shouldn't just be the counselors who are privy to that data. The administrators need to be part of that conversation, helping to make plans, support those plans. The district leadership also needs to know that data and be working to support the counseling team and the administrative team at one of those sites. That's the biggest thing that I've seen administrators fall into at various levels of the district, is that they don't know their data necessarily.
And having the data is not enough. You're talking about creating routines and systems.
That's right. Where
So
you're
that-
analyzing and you're coming to agreements around what are we going to do next to make sure that maximal support is provided to all kids, whether they're a 3.5 kiddo like Anabelia, who's needs support so she can get into the college that she wants to go to, or the kiddo who's below grade level or not achieving or maybe not on in process for graduation and needs additional assistance. Whatever that child needs, that they would receive that. It's very important and crucial that's happening in a nested way in a district system. Otherwise, again, that's different teams operating in isolation and not supporting each other through to that eventual goal. One more thing I would say as well is not only having a standard at each site for what each child will receive, but making sure everybody in the district knows that. So teachers, counselors, administrators, parents, and kids should know these are the things that should be coming to me as a student in this school. I should be receiving these pieces of information and making sure that's really visible, so
Mm.
that easy for people to go in and say, hey, I haven't had my college options session yet. When can I go and have that? So that's really important also. So those are the 2 things I would say I would like to leave folks with.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarita, for that. And amazing success, amazing results. What do you want people to know? And these are people who love students, who love all kids, who want the best for them, and may be struggling with those same historic patterns.
I don't want to put the pressure on teachers or administration or anything like that, but I like to think that I'm super blessed to have a good mom and a good family. And I think you need to think about the child's background. And I'm not just talking about their cultural background. I feel like there's some kids that want to go to college and maybe they don't have that support at home. So where do you get that support? Through a teacher, through a counselor? But what if you don't get it through them? Not to put the pressure on teachers and administration or anything like that, but I think the words that you use and the tone and all that matters, especially when you don't know the impact that you have on that student. Now I understand as an adult, there's a lot of things that just go on in life that you're stressed out, you're tired. The school systems aren't the best. So I feel like 200 in your caseload is a lot. So of course it's going to be hard to keep tabs on 200 students and all of that. What can we do? How many counselors are needed per student? Make sure it's personalized. Make sure you get the opportunity to not just see them once a year. And the day that you see them, it's a bad day. So your energy isn't the best. You don't know. So I guess what I just want to say is teachers have an impact, administration has an impact, counselors have an impact. Think about it.
What I'm taking away is, Sarita, you brilliantly laid out some very tangible, concrete ways to design a system to overturn historic patterns of achievement in the positive sense. And you expressed very eloquently the intangibles, the impact of the intangibles, things that we take for granted, that we don't consider. In the end, It's Ana and your friends and your family that we're trying to support. These aren't numbers, these are human beings. And so thank you for reminding us of that and celebrating the hero that is your mom. That comes through loud and clear. With that, we invite everybody to participate in our crowdsourcing of intel to continue to look for solutions for the daunting task that we've had for decades and decades, but also to celebrate the wins because they are out among us and to learn from them. Sarita Linda, thank you very much for sharing your time and wisdom with us. And Mija, Anabelia, thank you so much.
Shattering Inequities requires more than conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future of education together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for all students. Thanks for listening.